This is the Podcast, your privacy and data podcast, with me, Anthony Brown, interviewing leaders from across the industry to provide you with news, views, insight and opinion. Join me for Series 3, where I'll be talking to privacy thought leaders about their stellar careers. This is Journeys Through Privacy. Hello there, I'm Anthony Brown, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to another episode of the Podcast. For today's episode, I am really excited to be joined by Michelle Levin, who is the Global Privacy Director at Onfido. Michelle leads a global privacy team and sits on the executive team at Onfido, who, if you don't know already, are a fast growth AI company who digitally prove people's identities using a photo ID, facial biometrics and passive signals. So obviously all very topical at the moment. For us. So, Michelle, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you on. How's your week going?
My week's going really well, Anthony. Thank you. So I was at a conference yesterday speaking about digital assets and privacy, which was fascinating. It was the future, let's see if I can get this right, Future of Financial Services Summit. So really great bunch of people. Most importantly, though, the Onfido netball team won our semi-final match last night.
Oh, wow.
Finals next week.
Amazing. Tell me about that. So is it an inter-company thing, or is it just for anybody who can join in the league? Or
yeah, it's for anybody. We play in Shoreditch, so it's a really nice league. This is only my second match. I've just started playing netball again. Haven't played for probably 15 years, something like that. So I'm taking tentative steps. My husband keeps telling me not to kill myself or break a leg. It's so fun. I'm really enjoying it.
That is amazing. And, equally, I know we're going to come on to this later on, but you're an incredibly busy lady. You're a mum to a young daughter as well. And I think, interestingly, for our listeners later on during this session, you'll be talking about your experiences having sort of stepped off the train a little period of time for maternity leave, and then actually coming back to an extremely busy role, and now you're even managing to play netball as well. So super impressive stuff. So Michelle, you've had such an interesting career, and you've worked in a variety of sectors over the years, and obviously nothing probably more cutting edge than your current role with Onfido, who obviously slap bang in the middle of AI, which is, a topic that everyone's talking about, obviously, at the moment. Just firstly, though, would you mind just sort of telling us a bit about your earlier days, why you chose a career in law, please?
Oh, it's such a cliche. So my dad was a lawyer. My granddad was a lawyer. They both had high street practices in Liverpool. So whether you say it's in the blood or just, I don't know. My dad did everything he could to put me off it. I was put to work in the basement every holiday, doing like filing, any rubbish job. It was like, give it to Michelle. We don't want her being a lawyer. We were sent around Liverpool police stations to see clients. The police generally said, are you their girlfriend? Never thought I was part of the legal team. So whether it was a bit of like, this is interesting, really low expectations of people have of you, and just realizing that point of actually you can smash expectations, which was quite nice. And I then considered, I was really good at science at school, and so I considered medicine. I was far too squeamish, fairly interested in like research and could see something in there, but I realized I did not have the patience to sit and do experiments all day. So it was almost sort of fell into it a little bit. And probably some people would say my argumentative nature.
Nice. Well, I would argue that that's not particularly cliched. I mean, it was right there in front of you. Some people may have chosen not to go down that route, but obviously those hours in the basement doing all the menial jobs obviously captured your imagination, and you decided to become a lawyer. So amazing. So, okay. So then you no doubt had had a stellar education, and then you actually began your career as a trainee at Field Fisher Waterhouse, I think, as they were called back in those days. And obviously from the work that I've done over the years, and as you well know, during that time that you were sort of training, so I guess we're going back to the mid noughties now, something around there. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they were kind of pretty much the first kids on the block in terms of having a standalone data protection privacy practice, and of course. They really were being led by two very well-known individuals who are still at the very top of their game in Eduardo Ustaran, who's a friend of the podcast, appeared in episode 1, and Stuart Room, of course, as well, who, again, has had an absolutely stellar career. So I can't imagine that there would have been a better place for you at that time. How did the opportunity come about at Phil Fisher? Had you determined at this time that you wanted to go down that kind of route in privacy of data, these very early days, or did it just sort of land that way?
I wish I could say my career was sort of by design, but it's sort of fallen into place, and really from a lot of factors that are just outside my control. So I applied for a training contract early 2000s. I don't think I'd even heard of data protection. We definitely didn't study it at university, or I think even law school, maybe it was mentioned. And then even through the training contract, data protection was probably one of the least popular seats. No one wanted it. It just wasn't something you went into back then. But sort of why I ended up at Phil Fisher, I'd done lots of research. I'm sort of that person. I have to look at everything and analyze all the options. And so when looking for training contracts and thinking where might I go, I'd ruled out magic circle firms, just didn't feel they were a right fit for me, kind of had gone to some assessments days and open days and just never that interested. But what really caught my attention was the niche practices at mid-sized firms. So Phil Fisher in particular had really strong IP practice, media, life sciences as well. So it was that breadth of practice at Phil Fisher. They also did 6 seats back then rather than, I think it was the usual 4. So those extra 2 seats to try other departments out. I really didn't know where I wanted to go. I was thinking maybe medical negligence at one point, life sciences, IP. And so when I got there, really gravitated towards those seats. I was really lucky. I got to spend 4 months at MTV, which was the cool kid on the block back then. And that kind of introduced me to technology and commercial contracting. So from there, I then qualified into technology. But again, external forces, I think almost to the day that we qualified in my year, it was the date Lehman Brothers collapsed. So having trained through boom years, people went on skiing holidays. Trainees did proofreading because there was so many of us. Overnight, kind of all that vanished. The world changed. And so the technology department changed very quickly. And whereas I had spent a lot of my training contract or my final seat in technology we called it new media back then, but basically digital. Internet was still new and shiny, and companies were still exploring how to be online. I really wanted to do that work, and very quickly that dried up. And at the same time, privacy was still booming at Phil Fisher. So started to shift towards doing bits and pieces of privacy work as a stopgap, really. And it was very much, I'm going to do this. I want to find a new job somewhere else. Don't want to stay in privacy. Not where I want to do. I want to do IP. I want to do new media. And just really fell in love with privacy. It was quite academic at the time. You got to use the law a lot, work out where a client could operate in that grey space. Back then it was the old Data Protection Act. It was just fascinating. It was talking about technology as well in a way that kind of I hadn't really been engaged with. So yeah, just fell in love over it probably took 6 to 8 months, maybe a year before I was like, no, I think this might be my future.
Amazing. So I'm assuming then did you work closely with both Eduardo and Stuart, or how did it work? Yeah.
So Stuart joined after me in the team. So it was Eduardo leading the team when I joined. They worked very closely with him. I shared an office for a long time with Stuart, which was hilarious. We had many funny occasions. And then also had the great pleasure of working with Phil Lee, because he also joined the team. So we just had such a stellar practice. It was so exciting to be on the team doing really cutting edge privacy work. I remember once working with Eduardo to draft, it was the Bermudan privacy law or something absolutely ridiculous. So the opportunities were just fantastic. And also I was sent on a lot of secondments. So I think I was sent to BBC at least twice. I went to BBC Worldwide and the BBC, the public service. They very quickly got a taste for in-house life.
Amazing. And what a stellar cast of privacy lawyers there. I mean, talk about kind of being in the right place at the right time. Amazing. So that really set you up for what has become a hugely successful career of your own. So you're as you just mentioned, you went in-house, had lots of opportunities there. Did you kind of, I know you were at Fieldfisher for a few years and then you decided, you made a move actually, you moved to A.S. Watson, who many people know, one of the world's largest health and beauty retailers. And you moved there as a commercial and privacy counsel. Did you know early on, do you think, that you wanted to move in-house?
Yeah, so having done MTV, then BBC sort of twice, I then found the transition back to the law firm quite tricky. You'd gone from sitting with the business, having people just coming up to your desk, asking questions, not really caring whether you're a junior lawyer or a senior lawyer. You're a lawyer to them and you just need to help. And then to go back to the law firm and suddenly be in that environment where partners or senior associates have to review and sign off everything you do, sort of being more constrained. And I think for me, not understanding or not seeing where your advice went. So you write your advice note and then you never really get to see what the client does with it. I found that quite frustrating. I probably need to give a huge shout out to both Stuart, Eduardo, Phil, in fact, any senior lawyer in the privacy team back then, because I imagine I was a nightmare to manage. Like if I had to deal with me now, I think I would hate it. So bullshit, and just really thought way too much of myself. But yeah, then the opportunity for A.S. Watson came up.
Can I just ask you, sorry, Michelle, to interject there, just about that you just mentioned, you felt you were bolshy, and looking back, you think you're a nightmare to manage. Was there a sense, because the world's very different now than the place where you first trained? It's essentially nearly 20 years ago. And as we know, we know society has really moved on in many positive ways. Did you feel at that time that you needed to acquire that kind of personality, maybe to be successful and to get heard, and as a female, because it was very male dominated for a long time?
I think it was probably more naivety than anything else. As in, I've always been quite strong-willed. I sort of thought I knew where I wanted to go. And I think it was more that rather than anything else. But certainly, I think there was less acceptance of kind of different personalities. There's nothing against Fieldfisher here. I think just generally work has moved on. It was certainly, as a trainee, there was definitely a way of doing things and you fitted into that mold. And I cannot see kind of certainly the people coming up now that I see in house across all walks of life. It is a very different atmosphere and different way of managing.
Yeah. Much lighter touch, perhaps.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Lighter touch and more understanding and collaborative and all of these things.
I think younger people just know how to ask what they want, like louder and stronger, which is a really great thing. Like when I was entering the workforce, it was an expected way. And I think particularly as a junior lawyer, you were there to work as many hours as the firm requested to do any task. and you never question that because it was just how things were, and it's how everything has always been, and that was kind of, it was the circle of life type thing. Whereas now, I think certainly when you talk to Zennial, Gen Z or millennials, younger millennials, there's this great sense of questioning, and then also, do we want to be working all these hours? Like, is this the right thing for my life? Like, where do I want to be? And I think that's really exciting.
Absolutely. So you moved to in-house, you went to AS Watson, and you had a successful time there. So successful, you were actually approached by Aon to go and become a dedicated privacy counsel for them. So, and we're talking 10 years ago here. So sorry to keep talking about years, by the way, but we're talking 10 years ago. My point being that, you know, this is a number of years before GDPR coming into play. And it's fairly novel, I'd imagine. Well, I know full well because I was still working in the space back then. It was very novel for businesses to have dedicated in-house privacy counsel. Any sort of memories about how this came about and how perhaps ahead of the curve Aon were in what they were trying to do?
I remember, so it was Brad who had my headstrong ways of, I think I said no 2 or 3 times. Just kept saying I don't want to work for insurance. Again, that headstrong, very narrow view of where I wanted my career to go, that didn't fit in with that vision. And I remember going for a coffee with Brad, who basically just said, sort of set out the Aon proposition. So huge global business, provides pensions to a huge proportion of the UK population, and basically set out that, think about all that data they have. So from pensions perspective, from insurance, and it's the privacy team's role to set the rules as to how and why that can be used, to really protect it, be the guardians of that. And it was when that sort of clicked that I was going to be moving from sort of health and beauty retailer that was sort of slightly probably cooler, could do marketing, could do lots of interesting things, more tangible, because you could see the things that we were selling, to actually being in a business that data was the lifeblood. And it was that shift in mindset of realizing that actually you don't need to be in the coolest industry to have like this fulfilling career. It's almost, and in fact, for a privacy lawyer, what's important is how important is data to the business, because then you become less of a cost center and more of business enablement. You get to work more closely with the business.
And during your time then, you must have done such a good job that you became the EMEA privacy director. Sorry, I know I'm embarrassing you here, Michelle. You don't want too much praise, but it's true. You became the EMEA privacy director, which, you know, at this stage, again, we're talking ahead of GDPR here. How did you find that step up? And quite a quick step up as well. So you're now managing a team. How was it to move to that seniority?
It was definitely a challenge, and Aon is such a big beast that it was always hard to get your arms around it. But again, I've been really fortunate that I've had very supportive teams. So it didn't really feel like a huge step up. It was more gradual, which was really nice. There wasn't some sort of yanking of that safety blanket. But we had such a great team at Aon. We sort of recruited a really great bunch of people, just had such a laugh. Both in the privacy team, the wider legal team was huge as well. And there's great camaraderie. I think that was really where I first started to see the importance of both mentors in a role. I had a few people across the business who were really important and instrumental in sort of shaping directions and how I kind of made that step up. Certainly at Aon, it was the first time I would be put in front of a board and have to explain the importance of privacy. And there's sort of nothing like that first time and being thrown in front of, back then it was a room full of middle-aged white men as well, and having to sort of explain and make a case for why you should get budget over all the other competing priorities. And certainly couldn't have done that without some key stakeholders who really bought into what I was trying to do, or we as the data privacy team, and really help amplify those messages.
So, prior to GDPR coming into play and without the threat of these enormous fines for businesses, it's obviously then made exec boards really sit up and really think about this very closely. What do you remember some of the sort of sort of rationales, or the sort of how you'd get things over the line from a privacy perspective? What were you having to describe to the business then about? There's no fines necessarily, or it's large fines. What in those days was it more of a sort of a moral argument, or what we should be doing?
I've never been a big fan of using the fining powers. Yes, they were really helpful in sort of 2016, 2018. They grabbed a lot of attention. But when you're actually talking to someone trying to get something done in a business, the fines are so remote. And that's not what this person is concerned about, because most of the time they are concerned with doing today's job or hitting the next objective and delivering that project. So the fact that something could go wrong, that they still don't really understand what that is, and then a regulator might get involved, and then that regulator might decide to fine, versus if they do or don't hit their deadline, their immediate deadline, their job will be on the line or their team will be impacted. I've always found that a difficult argument to sell when you actually want to make tangible change. I think far more useful is understanding what the business drivers are. Often that's about reputation. So like the threat of reputation, something destroying reputation, is a lot more powerful. For most businesses, they trade on their reputation. And if that's destroyed, then it's their business gone. Or if they are prevented from using data in a certain way, that's far more powerful than the remote fining powers, which are useful at the end of the line, but most people know that we should comply with the law, and it's sort of like yes, of course. So it's actually about moving from this is something we have to do to this is how we get it done, and trying to make that transition.
And I guess explaining that if we do this, it's not just that we're going to be within the regulations or the law, but actually our clients, our customers are going to start really trusting us, or the engagement with them, it can be used for good, real positive stuff. So
every business is on a journey on that spectrum. So on Onfido, privacy is actually a differentiator. So we see it. We have really strong privacy practices, and we use that as a competitive moat. And that's been really exciting, because that's a whole different conversation to going back to like using those fines and those threats. Much more of a carrot. It's much more of a really seen as a business enabler, which is great.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt Onfido's an incredibly exciting business, and I guess I think you work with a lot of fintechs, and but ultimately you use a huge amount of customer data, because I'm sure a lot of people listening to this now will be familiar with taking a selfie on their phone, uploading it, and having their ID verified, almost instantly. And this is obviously the power of the technology that Onfido has. I'm going to slightly skip forward a bit here, because what I do know, Michelle, is that you went to, you actually, after quite a period at Aon in a very senior role, then you moved to another global beauty company called Coty, that's got over 70 brands across the globe. You were actually lured there. It sounds like it's a negative thing. You actually, the pull factor there was essentially you were, you were going to be the, I think the global head of privacy there. This is round about, I think, the time that GDPR came into play there or thereabouts. And I'm saying I'm going to slightly skip that because I mean that was another step in your career, moving on from Aon. Now you're global head. That of course brings lots of other different additional joy and challenges. But then, just as we started talking about Onfido, let's sort of move forward to that bit, because this is present day for you. And I think, what's really fascinating actually is that you were actually on maternity leave when you were approached about the role at Onfido. With good reason, Onfido were very keen to get you on board. But of course, this was a really kind of, unique time of your life. But you actually did make the move there. So can you just tell us a bit about how that all came about, please?
Well, there was a really persistent recruiter who wouldn't leave me alone.
Okay.
I think so Evie was born in November. I think we might have first started talking in the January, February, I think. So sort of still not really out of those first few months blur. And I think I probably quite quickly dismissed it and said, no, not interested, can't get my head and back into a space where I'd even start talking to someone. And I think you provided some really great counsel of just meet with them, have a chat. It was during COVID, so it made everything easier because everything was via Zoom. So it was sort of that less of it broke down a barrier of, oh my gosh, I have to somehow find childcare and I somehow have to get dressed. So I think that made it a lot easier to make that initial jump to start a conversation. And the team at Onfido are, well, from that point, and then they are today incredibly flexible, really kind of family focused, and kind of put caring needs not first, obviously, but are just very adaptable and flexible. So made that having those initial conversations really easy. And I think from there I was sort of bitten a little bit, because talking to Onfido as a privacy lawyer, you've got biometrics, you've got AI, you've got a lot of sensitive data. They're doing really exciting things, but also they really treat privacy as a core business principle. So it's that not only do you have all this cutting edge technology, but you already have a seat at the table. And that I think is quite a rare find. So yeah, we sort of went from there, went through the interview process, juggling between nap times. I can't remember how many interviews I had with a baby on my lap crying.
Yeah.
And just it was interesting, but everyone was so accommodating. It made that feel much easier and more natural.
It was an amazing process to be involved in, actually, and I obviously remember it well, and not least because it was during the pandemic and the world had just been turned upside down. But I mean, it was a match made in heaven from the get-go. I remember thinking at the time how modern and forward-thinking Onfido were with their approach. There's businesses over the years that, although they'd never admit it, I wonder if they have made decisions based on the circumstances of perhaps a female who's in the interview process and what their circumstances might be. But Onfido were incredibly clear that you were the person they wanted, and that whether you're on maternity leave or how it's all going to pan out, they were prepared to wait for you. And yes, I remember you actually calling me and saying, do you think they'll mind me having, in fact, I think it was with somebody in the US, do you think this senior individual will mind if I've got my baby on my lap? And I asked them and they said, absolutely not. No, absolutely fine. So, because, it's a huge discussion point increasingly, and probably not enough is discussed around this. I know some amazing female lawyers that have been lost, sadly, to their careers in law over the last few years, because the demands of the role and the demands of parenthood are such that the most obvious answer as a family usually is that the mum will stay at home, and the father, or whether it be another mother or father, or however it works, we'll go out and be the main earner. So how have you found it, Michelle? Are you able just to share a little bit with us, how you juggle your life, how you juggle the work? Because it's such a demanding, busy role at Onfido for you. It's a global role.
I think there's no easy answer. Like my husband and I, we both have to juggle. We both kind of split childcare and everything else, which I know I'm really lucky in that respect. But I don't think you can do it another way. You definitely can't do everything. And there is this fallacy that women can have it all. Yes, we can, but you need to have support structures in place because we're not superhuman. Well, not all of us are superhuman. I definitely know a few superhuman women that are just phenomenal. But we're in a fortunate position that we can have full-time childcare. So Evie goes to nursery longer than some people work. So she's there 8 till 6. She loves it. She's really happy. She settled quite quickly. So that also made that transition really, or much easier. And again, having lots of working women who are in the same position, talking about it a lot and really sort of saying that, particularly for a girl, I think it's important to see working mums and strong women. And you're yes, it is really hard to leave them, but you're also setting really important lessons for that next generation. You can go out to work and you are holding down a really good job whilst also sort of trying to be as present as possible. Might not always be the case, but certainly for me, I couldn't see doing it another way. I love working. I'm really fortunate to have a great job, really find really fascinating in a company that does allow flexibility to kind of balance those two things. And I think as well, and I hope this is changing, being able to bring your, whatever you say, bring your full self to work. So I'm really glad that Onfido, and maybe also the time we are in, enables me to go to work, be a lawyer, but also talk about being a mum. I could not see myself in an environment where you had to have this split personality and that you were forced to not talk about your child and to have sort of these two personas that never two shall meet. I think I would find that really challenging, and whether that's because I joined Onfido as a new mum and so didn't ever have the old comparison. I was never Michelle pre-children there. So no one knew what I was like before children. So they took me with Evie, sort of thing. So there was no comparison, whether for me, because I think women, we all compare ourselves to sort of the best version, often quite negatively. And so being able to start a new job as a new mum and kind of work all these things out with Onfido, with the colleagues in the legal team who are incredibly supportive and are just a really great bunch. It's just made that transition much easier.
Yeah, and imagine that feeling of starting a new role and knowing that everyone knows you as you are and the support network's there, and you're being set up for success, and there's no judgment or anything. It just must have been, well, I remember when you joined, it was liberating for you. I think from people, I'm not necessarily saying you here, but ladies that I've spoken to over the years who, are off on maternity leave, and then it can be quite a lonely place at times, and they start doubting how they're going to be when they get back, and how, have I, things move so quickly in the privacy world, as we know. Have I lost my edge and all this sort of stuff? So you've got, to make things work, you have to have all those components, I think, that you've just explained and described.
Yeah, and I wish I knew who it was. One of my friends. So you get a lot, obviously you get so much advice when whether you're pregnant, whether new mum, going back to work. And I obviously spoke to a lot of people about it and weighing up, do I stay in a job that I'm comfortable with? I've got a proven track record. if I kind of can't give 100% to the job, they at least have this kind of this view of, well, this won't be forever. Like I've got, yeah, it's the track record.
Mm.
And a lot of people said, yeah, don't rock the boat, go back, go into what you know, it's more comfortable. You don't know what's going to happen, keep some stability. And one of my friends, and if they're listening, like, thank you, and let me know if it was you, just said, no, can't think of a word that I'm allowed to say on a podcast. Never mind that. When you start a new job, you don't have those comparisons. Like, you will never be able to work as hard as you used to, or most people can never work as hard as that you used to. And you and the company, or probably mostly you, will always be comparing yourself to that old person. And that's, I think, one of the struggles. And they just said, just do it. Like, you can set your own boundaries. You can set your own new kind of persona up. And it was that advice that kind of made me think, okay, go for it. And yeah, I think really important advice, and something you don't really hear.
Yeah. Well, particularly as well, because as we said, the world was upside down at that period of time, and people, if anything, were looking for stability and, just something to cling on to, because everything was so uncertain. So, I mean, it's obviously kind of testament to your character as well, Michelle, and going back to your Bolshe days, obviously being carved out your personality in the basement, doing filing and stuff as well. So, everyone's getting an insight here into what makes you tick, and it's really, really impressive. So everyone's obviously talking about AI at the moment, and obviously at Onfido, you're in the coalface of all of this space because their products are AI powered. What's your view on just general view, firstly, on AI and how companies can embrace it, for good and crucially safely as well? What's your general thoughts?
So much being said about this. I'm going to stay away from the existential threats because who knows? Let's hope we work that out. But I think importantly, as some of the laws are going in the direction of some of the laws that are going, it's about having the right governance in place. So there is so much potential in all these technologies, both good and bad. So I think it's really important that we harness it in the right way. So whether you call that ethical AI or AI governance, kind of pick your terminology, but sort of principles that are very aligned to GDPR principles, privacy principles. So fairness, transparency, explainability, automated decisions, and making sure that there is control and some sort of human control around it, I think are all really critical. It also means it's a really interesting space for privacy lawyers, because we have worked in this with these terminologies, with these principles for so long that it does enable us to then apply this to AI. And through GDPR, we have got and before had experience of deploying big governance frameworks throughout organizations. And it's really sort of doing that in the right way. And what is right for Onfido is going to be very different from another company. I'm having lots of conversations at the moment because Onfido is an AI company. We have been for 10 years. So a lot of people across the business are sort of saying, like, we've been doing this for 10 years. What's changed? And it's not the way we are using this technology that's changed. It's the world in which we're operating in. So a lot of times, or previously, AI has just been in the background, and we've lived with it every day, and many, many technologies are not thought about it. But with generative AI and ChatGPT, it's really kind of grabbed the public consciousness and lawmakers as well for the right reasons. And we are having these very important debates, and what is the direction of travel that this has to go in.
Yeah, I mean, it's never far from anyone's lips at the moment in the privacy world. That's for sure. But I mean, wow. I mean, for you, amazing timing being at Phil Fisher, amazing kind of mentors, leaders, partners to work with, as we said with Eduardo and Stuart, at a time when digital, new media, everything was coming in, and your career's just sort of, well, you've just gone from, one exciting role to another, essentially. And I mean, look at where you're at now. It's fascinating for you. And AI is, as I said, it's everyone's talking about, and the whole spectrum, the amount of opportunity that is going to open up over the coming years. The sort of experience that you have at Onfido is just unique and fascinating. So, Michelle, we're nearly finished now. But what would you say, based on your experiences now and knowledge, if somebody is similar to you, but going back to the days when you were starting training as a lawyer, or just trying to think what they want to do as their career, what's the sort of single biggest piece of advice you think you'd give to somebody now?
Not wanting to fall into the same trap of my dad and say, don't be a lawyer. I think you can't ignore AI and the impact it's going to have on careers. And so that's sort of, I think, important to consider. And we don't know where it's going to go. But I don't think any lawyer now can ignore technology, because whether you are a corporate lawyer, just sort of doing M&A activities, increasingly everything's going to involve data or some sort of technology, because it is the future, and they are going to be the foundations that businesses are built on. So I think it is really stay up to date with what's going on, because that is going to, within technology, because that's going to help you not only kind of put you in the best possible position, but also I think increasingly as lawyers, we are going to have to use technology. So whether that is using AI tools to do research, to help us kind of get to the right question. There's already loads of drafting tools out there that is going to make the sort of drafting contracts easier. We are all going to have to use technology in ways that I think previously we haven't thought about. And then probably be more open than I was. You don't know where your career is going to go. Certainly don't be so adverse to different industries. I've been really fortunate to move to many different industries. I think I've taken something really important from each one. And yeah, I think, that's it.
Well, that was three big pieces of advice. So thank you. And all really relevant. And the AI piece, again, really interesting to hear your thoughts on that people, if you're moving into law at this stage, you really want to be thinking about that and the potential and where things could lead. So for a bit of fun, Michelle, I always ask people this. Who would be your two ultimate dinner guests?
I've gone rogue. I've got three.
Not again.
Yeah, sorry. How three? So Margaret Atwood would be my first. I listened to a podcast with her and I just think she's phenomenal. She's just so fascinating, and how she wrote The Handmaid's Tale and the Testaments, just really interesting at a time that she really saw a lot of the problems that society and women are facing. And I think certainly when I first read The Handmaid's Tale, it was like, this wouldn't happen. And yet when you see what's going on across the world and women's rights being kind of withdrawn, like, it's quite scary. Definitely Margaret, would love her at a table. I then wanted someone funny, and I thought Phoebe Waller-Bridge, because again, she's just awesome. And I think she would have some great stories from Hollywood as well. So try and get her drunk and spill some beans. And then the third is really to balance it out, because would want some male company in the mix as well, and thought Hugh Jackman, because again, just very funny, interesting. I'm sure would be well up for telling some tales as well.
Yeah, very good. Maybe some eye candy there as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, everyone was thinking it, but I thought I'd say it. So awesome. Oh, brilliant, Michelle. Well, I'm sure that'll be a fascinating dinner anyway. And I'd just like to say thank you so much for joining us. It's been really, really insightful, really fascinating. I really hope our listeners can take some stuff away with them. I'm sure they will. So thank you very much on behalf of me and everyone, and to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And we'll be discussing more journeys through privacy very soon. Bye for now.
Bye bye.